Hi everybody, welcome to the Deaver Wellness Farm at Lankenau Medical Center. My name is DJ and I am a farmer and a teacher, and our classroom is the farm. So together we're going to learn all about where food comes from, how it grows, and why fresh food is super important for our bodies and our communities. So today we're going to get started at the very beginning, which is a very good place to start, and we're going to learn all about seeds and sprouts. So if you'll join me, let's go into the farm and get started. Let's begin with a little tour of the farm so we can get to know this space and check out all of the wonderful food that's growing here so far. So it's the springtime, which means that we are growing a lot of greens and root vegetables. And you'll notice that we're growing all of our food in these raised beds. So these are wooden boxes that grow all of our food above ground. So you might see a lot of different places in the city that can't grow down in the ground, so we grow above it. So we fill these wooden boxes with soil and we transplant baby plants in here, and this is where they grow. So when we're ready to harvest, this is where we harvest from. So in these beds we have radishes and turnips, and over in this bed we have arugula and lettuce mix. Over here we have our herb garden, which is full of delicious smelling herbs that we like to pick and smell. This is mint. Over here we have more leafy greens. Here we have some head lettuce. This is some spinach, some baby spinach. And under this cover, we have Swiss chard and kale and collard greens. We like to keep some of our plants tucked in so that they can stay warm on the cold nights. Some of the plants we like to grow in this area of the farm include potatoes, scallions, more Swiss chard, more kale, more turnips, some leafy greens, some carrots, and my personal favorite over here, which is garlic. So these green stems have little garlic bulbs growing underneath them, and we'll harvest them later on in the summer. Over here we have more raised beds. This is the future site of all our tomato plants. We have our storage shed and we have our cold storage shed. So when we harvest, when we pick the food when it's ready, that's where we store it before we give it out to people in our community. We're gonna pass by the greenhouse here. We'll go inside there in just a minute. It's the outside of the greenhouse. And we have even more raised beds over here. So this is where we're growing all sorts of greens. We have some beets down at that end. We have some beautiful leafy greens here. And on this large bed here is where we have just seeded some carrots. Over here we have our herb and flower garden. So we've just transplanted some little baby flowers here. They're going to grow up to be big and colorful and beautiful and attract pollinators. We'll have and then we also have some really lovely smelling herbs. This is oregano. It smells like pizza sauce. We also have some anise hyssop. Smells like licorice. And we have some lemon balm. I bet you can't guess what this smells like. You might notice that right behind me is this big building here. So this is Lankenau Medical Center. So this farm is actually on the grounds of a big medical center where they have a hospital. They have all sorts of doctors that work there that are currently helping people, saving lives. So we're really lucky to work with Lankenau Medical Center to give food out to patients that need it, to work with their education department, to teach people about healthy eating and how fresh food is really good for your body. So we love being this close to So as we said before, our lesson today is on seeds and sprouts. So I think the best place to go and learn about that is right here in our greenhouse. So let's go inside and take a look at what's growing. So here we are in the greenhouse. This is a really special structure that we have here on the farm. This is where we start all of our seeds, and you can tell that they love growing in here because there's tons of sunlight coming through this translucent roof. So the point of a greenhouse is to let sunlight in, trap heat, and keep our baby plants nice and warm and protected while they're just getting their first leaves sprouting up. So all these baby plants we're looking at started out as just a tiny seed, because we know that even the tallest tree starts out as just a tiny seed, right? So even these big sunflower plants started out as a seed. And these are all baby plants that are growing, and when they're ready, we're going to transplant them. So just take them from in here and plant them out into one of the raised beds that we have out on the farm. So we have all sorts of things growing in here. We have some tomatoes, we have some herbs, some onions, we have some baby beets started, and we have our squash plant. There are a couple things about this greenhouse that make it the perfect place to grow baby plants. One of them we said is the ceiling, which is translucent, which means it lets in light, so that keeps it nice and warm in here. The other thing we need is airflow. So we need air to flow from one end to the other so it doesn't get too stuffy in here. So we have these fans. We also have this big fan behind me over here. So that keeps air flowing from one end to the other. It goes out those shutters. So on really hot days, it still stays cool enough so the plants aren't suffocating in here. Another thing our baby plants need a lot of is water. So we have a very cool system that turns water on from these pipes on the ceiling, comes all the way down, and it comes out of this little spigot right here. So all these baby plants get showered with water a couple times a day, and it's on an automatic timer so that us farmers don't have to keep remembering to come in here and water by hand. So today we're learning about seeds and sprouts here in the greenhouse. So first we're going to look at how this seed became this plant, and then we're going to learn how to plant our very own seeds, which you can do in your very own home. So here we have our seed. This is a summer squash seed. So if you've ever had zucchini or a yellow squash, this is how it starts out. It's this tiny little seed. So the first thing a seed does when it just has that first pop up right out of the soil, that's called germination. So if we come over to the next phase, these are some squash seeds that are a little bit further along in their life cycle. So these are germinating squash seeds. And you can see how they're just starting to pop up out of the soil. This one has just started emerging this morning probably. And you can even see that some of them still have their seed attached just to the top of their leaves like a little hat. So if you notice, our seed that we just planted looks pretty similar to the seed that's on top. So these seeds have germinated. They've got their first leaves. The first leaves of a plant are called the cotyledons, or birth leaves. So they might look a little bit different from how the rest of the leaves are going to look on the plant. This one you can see is the biggest one. So this has had the most time to grow. So now that the seeds have germinated, the next thing they might do is grow a little bigger, right? With all this sunlight and water and air in here, these happy plants are going to grow and grow. So this is how we get our seedlings, our little squash plant seedlings. And if you don't believe me that they just started out as a seed, you can tell right here. This one still has its seed on the top of its leaf, like a little hat. So these squash plants are going to keep growing a little bit longer in this greenhouse, and then when they're big enough, they're ready to go out into the world, we're going to transplant them out into one of those raised beds we just saw in the garden. So now that we've seen how a seed becomes a seedling, let's try it ourselves. So if you're following at home, you can check out our lesson info sheet to see what materials you'll need and a list of all the different things that you can start from seed this time of year in the spring. So today we're going to start by planting green beans. This is one of my favorite things to plant. So when you're gathering your materials, you know that you'll need a container, you'll need soil, you'll need seeds, and you'll need water, and that's it. So here at the farm, we grow our seedlings in these trays. We call them flats. So they have lots of different little pockets for lots of different seedlings so that we can fill all those beautiful raised beds that we have out in the garden. So if you're doing this at home, you can grow in all different kinds of containers. You can grow in a recycled yogurt container, you could grow in an egg carton, or you can even use an eggshell. So I've filled this one with soil just to show you that this is another place. This is a fun way that you can grow seedlings and use something that you would have been throwing out anyway. When you have your container, you want to make sure that it's got holes in the bottom, something for drainage, so something that can let water come out the bottom. Because if you have your seed, if you plant your seed and then you water it and then the water sits in there, it gets kind of to be like a swamp, and seedlings need a little bit more air when they're germinating, right? So we want to make sure that your container has drainage, and you want to make sure that it's big enough for a little bit of the root structure to form in the seedling before it's ready to be brought out into the garden. So if you're growing in an egg, that's okay. The egg will actually let some of the water through. It's a little bit porous. We would call it a porous surface. And for our tray here, we have these holes on the bottom so that water can come in the top, feed the little seed, and then go through the bottom when it's done. So we have our seeds, we have our container. Our soil mix is just a regular seeding mix. It doesn't need compost. All my gardeners out there, if you're used to adding compost to your potting soil, that's for if you're growing on, if you're ready to transplant. For your seed mix, you don't need any compost because the seed has everything it needs right there in its little seed package. So it just needs a growing medium. So you can find a seeding mix at your local garden center. So we use ours, we use the same seeding mix for all of our seedlings here at the farm. So when you're thinking about getting ready to plant, you want to make sure that your soil is a little bit moist but not too wet. So we like to do the squeeze test. So if you can squeeze some in your hand and it keeps its shape but doesn't leak water, then you know that it's a good amount of moisture. So you want it to stick together a little bit, but you don't want it to be leaking water, right? So you want to moisten your soil a little bit. So we filled this flat with some moist soil, and we are going to get ready to plant. We have our seed packet. There's a lot of information on seed packets, whether you order from, these are from Seed Savers Exchange, or you can order from lots of different seed companies. There's information about that on our lesson info sheet as well. And they're always going to tell you how to plant the seed, how long it takes to grow, the kind of light that it needs, all different kinds of information. This one has historical information, so you can learn a whole lot about the seeds that you're planting from the seed packet or the purveyor of the seeds. So we're going to go ahead. Every time I seed, I like to take my seeds, I like to pour a little bit into my hand. Make sure your hands aren't too wet or dirty, and then you have your seeds. They're fun to plant because they're nice and big, and they remind me of something that I would eat. A bean, right? There are lots of different kinds of seeds that are also edible foods. So if we think about beans, if we think about peas, if we think about corn, right? The seed is also the part of the plant that you eat. So we'll talk. So the first thing I like to do when I'm planting in any container is I take my finger, I make a little hole. So we're gonna make a hole in each of these cells that we have in our flat. So this is gonna grow 50 bean plants. So maybe at home, if you have your container, whatever it is, if you're planting in this egg, you just wanna make a little indent. right in the center there. And then all that's left to do is plant your seed, right? So you take one seed, put it in that little hole, and however many you're doing, so we've planted all of our seeds in the little holes. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna cover them up. And the reason that we do this is because most seeds need darkness to germinate. So we cover them up with the soil so that they get a nice, dark, cozy spot. They'll be watered, they'll be nice and warm, and when they're ready, they'll sprout their first little leaves, and that's when we see germination happen. If you've got your eggshell or your whatever container you're using, same thing, you've got your little hole, plant your seed, should look something like this, and then you just cover it up, give it a nice cozy place, and this is the most important part, you have to say, good luck little seed. So now we know that seeds need soil, a little bit of darkness, and then they also need water. So we're gonna take our seeds that we just planted, we're gonna water them in. Here in the greenhouse, we use a small hose to water all the flats that we need to water. At home, you can use a watering can or a spray bottle that works pretty well. So you're just gonna put a little bit of water. Again, you don't want them to be too wet, but we just give them a little bit of water. Just a little drink, get our little eggshell, give them a nice start. Now that we've seen how we start seeds here at the greenhouse and how you can start seeds in your own home, let's go ask Farmer Jenny how she starts seeds in her garden.
Hi friends, this is Jenny. I'm joining you from my home. I have a little garden bed that I constructed out here, and so I'm going to be doing some direct seeding in it. Today I'm planting cilantro and spinach. So I'm going to plant with you the spinach. Spinach has a relatively small seed, and so it doesn't need to be planted very deep in the ground. When you're planting a seed, you want it to be as deep as the size of it times 2. So really shallow. So I'm just with my finger gonna make a little shallow trench for these seeds to go in. And the spinach I'll sprinkle about 1 inch apart. 1 inch to 2 inches, maybe even 1/2 inch. This can be sown pretty close because I'm gonna harvest it when the leaves are still small, and I'll be able to cut a few leaves and come back to it. And then I'll come through and cover up those seeds just a little bit. All right, now that they're all tucked in, I'll give them some water and those will grow. I'll be able to have spinach in several weeks. All right, thanks for planting with me.
Very cool, Farmer Jenny. Thank you for showing us how you start seeds in the ground in your garden. So as you can see, there's a lot of different ways that you can start seeds. What matters most is that you're just trying it out, you're growing something, you're making the world a greener place. So we want to say thank you so much for joining us this week, for getting to know the farm a little bit, for planting seeds with us. And we want to say stay tuned because there's going to be more lessons on composting and food systems and bugs and parts of the plant and nutrition, recipes, all sorts of good stuff coming to you from us at Greener Partners at the Deaver Wellness Farm at Lankenau Medical Center. Well, that's our lesson for today. Thank you so much for joining us, for tuning in, for learning with us, for participating. We can't wait to see what your seedlings look like. So again, stay tuned for lots of different lessons from us at Greener Partners. Thank you to Mainline Health and our partnership with Lankenau Medical Center for giving us this space to grow and learn together. So we'll see you next time. Bye!